Okay, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today. We'll go straight on, and first of all, this is a lovely photograph of Mother and Father Dunn. And this is a photograph of Mother when she placed the sacred earth from the castle of Marku in the foundation of the House of Worship during the foundation ceremony in 1958. And I have a recording of her saying a prayer at this time, and that's what I'm going to share with you now. So you will hear my father introducing her. He was at that time chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly. This is in 1958. And he was also a hand. But as chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly, he introduced her. And so you will hear his voice in the beginning. And then if you listen very carefully, Mother says to him, "Can I hold on to you?" Because remember, she's 88 at this time. Okay, so she was a bit frail. And so she said, "Can I hold on to you?" And she held on to my dad's arm as she said this prayer.
Friends, we shall start the temple dedication ceremony by opening with a prayer from our dear and beloved Clara Dunn, who, as you all know, was the pioneer to this continent, who has established and been responsible for establishing a world faith on one of the continents of the world.
Can I hold on to you? Oh Lord, my God, my haven in my distress, my shield and my shelter in my woe, my asylum and refuge in time of need, and in my loneliness, my companion, in my anguish, my solace, and in my solitude, a loving friend, the remover of the pangs of my sorrows and the pardoner of my sins. Wholly unto thee do I turn, fervently imploring thee with all my heart, my mind, and my tongue to shield me from all that runs counter to thy will. In this, the cycle of thy divine unity, and to cleanse me of all defilement that will hinder me from seeking, stainless and unsullied, the shade of the tree of thy grace. Have mercy, O Lord, on the feeble, make whole the sick, and quench the burning thirst. Gladden the bosom wherein the fire of thy love doth smolder, and set it aglow with the flame of thy celestial love and spirit. Robe the tabernacles of divine unity with the vesture of holiness, and set upon my head the crown of thy favor. Illumine my face with the radiance of the orb of thy bounty, and graciously aid me in ministering at thy holy threshold. Make my heart overflow with love for thy servants, and grant that I may become the sign of thy mercy, the token of thy grace, the promoter of concord amongst thy loved ones, devoted unto thee, uttering thy commemoration, and forgetful of self, but ever mindful of what is thine. O Lord, my God, stay not from me the gentle gale of thy pardon and grace, and deprive me not of the wellspring of thine aid and favor. 'Neath the shade of thy celestial wings let me nestle, and cast upon me the glance of thine all-protecting eye. Loose my tongue to laud thy name midst thy servants, and my voice may be raised in great assemblies, and from my lips may stream the flood of thy praise. For thou art in truth the gracious, the glorified, the merciful, the omnipotent.
So a very strong voice from Mother at the age of 88. So here's a photograph of both Hyde Dunn and Clara. And of course, Clara came in to my life as a small child. My parents became Baha'is in December of 44. I was born in 46. And right from my early days, I remember Mother in our house. And this is just one example of her sitting with the family, my other 3 sisters and my mum. And I mean, I don't really remember this occasion, but it looks like she has a basket on her lap, and each of the girls have got something, and I think she's given us gifts, which she often did, and we shared gifts back to her as we got older. I certainly did, and I know my sisters did also, and we'll talk about that a little later. Here's another photograph of us with the family, with Mother, and I'm of course the youngest of the little girls there in the left-hand photo. And then there I am sitting on Mother's lap with my other 2 sisters. Here we are in a dress-up, and Mother's looking at me on her left. I'm on her left. And here Mother is, I remember this very clearly. Mother stayed with us in 1954, and it was the time when my brother was born in September of 54, and there she is. He's a very tiny baby there, and she's giving him the bottle. It was at this time that my father did a recording of Mother, which we have today. It's in the archives, of Mother giving her story of how she met, how first of all she met, heard of the faith, and she heard it from Hyde. He introduced her to the faith, and then how she met Abdu'l-Baha, and a very beautiful story from Mother. Here we are in 1957. This was after the passing of Shoghi Effendi, and all the hands were meeting in Haifa, and so Mother and my father travelled. Mrs. Bowes, who's standing next to Mother Dunn there, was her companion, because Mother was 87 at this time. And before Mother left, she had to get a passport because she didn't have one. And it all had to be done so quickly because, you know, Shoghi Effendi passed away on the 4th of November. And this is just towards the end, about 3 weeks later, they had to leave. So she had to get a passport, she had to get her vaccinations, Everything had to be brought up to date, and also her wardrobe, because she didn't have suitable clothes for travelling. And so I remember my mother going into David Jones and Maya, and she brought back a suitcase of clothes. And Mother tried them on, and she decided what she wanted. And then my mum took the rest of the clothes back. So that was how we were able to prepare her. She was staying with us at that time. And I'm the little girl down on the left-hand corner of the photograph with my little brother, and then my sister Margaret, and up in the left hand, my elder sister Kay next to my mother, and my sister Joan behind her, then of course my father. And some of you will recognise Dr. Peter Kahn on the right-hand side. The two people behind Mrs. Bowes, who's next to Mother, there's a lady, her name was Helen Reisenweber, and to her right at the back is Jo. Now, their mother was Bertha Dobbins. And at this time, Bertha was already in New Hebrides in Vanuatu. And so Helen and Jo were at home with the father. And of course, Bertha, Darwin just reminded me, Bertha introduced the faith, first of all, to my mother. And then my mother told my father about it, and then they found out more about it. That's another big story. Here's another lovely photograph of us at the Yerrimble Summer School of 57, 58. And I'm the little girl down there on the bottom holding a little book. And that is my autograph book. If you can see that, it's my autograph book. And there's a photograph of Mother. And this is her hidden word that she wrote in my book, which many of you know, in the garden of thine heart, plant naught but the flowers of love. Hidden words, Mother Dunn. My sister told me that in her autograph book, she wrote, because my sister was 7 years older than me, she wrote, "Think more of the Lord and less of the boys." So this kind of shows a little bit of Mother's wit. You know, she was half Irish and half British. So she had that little bit of an Irish wit with her. You know, when we were growing up, Mother used to, well, we were very close to Mother, and my father would go to National Assembly meetings about once a month from Adelaide to Sydney, where they were held at 2 Lang Road, Paddington, which was the Hazaradal Quds at that time. And I would go to the corner shop. I had 3 corner shops near where I lived. And I would go to the corner shop and pick all the black jelly beans out of the jar and put them in a little bag with a little bow or something around them and ask my dad to give them to her. She loved black jelly beans. And then she also liked cashmere bouquet soap. And remembering, this is in the 50s, we didn't have the variety of soaps that we have now in the supermarkets. There were very few varieties, but she loved cashmere bouquet soap. So I would buy her a packet of cashmere bouquet and I would send that to her. In 1953, when my parents went and attended the Intercontinental Conference in New Delhi, Mother also attended. After that conference, my parents went on pilgrimage. But because my parents went away, we children were all shipped out to family. And I went to stay with my auntie and uncle. And I received a letter from Mother, obviously before she left. And she wrote to me, and here's the letter in her handwriting at that time, very large handwriting. And she said, "My dear little Princess Mariette, with all my love, you must be a real princess for Abdu'l-Baha and the beloved guardian. Show all the other children how kind and loving you can be, and of all things, do all you can for Mummy and Daddy, who loves you so much and has done so much for you while they are away in India. Make them proud to hear all the kind things you have done for your auntie and uncle. With my dear love to you, lovingly, Mother Dunn." So you can see the care that she took, you know, remembering that in those days, the communication was by letter. Mother wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters. We alone, our family and my parents and children, have a stack of letters like this. They've all gone off to the archives now and we have copies. Yes, that's how she wrote. And you know, she didn't let you escape. When she wrote to you, and if you hadn't replied within about 2-3 months, she would write and she would say, "Oh, my dear, I haven't heard from you, but I know you must be so busy looking after your family, just sending you my love and telling you that I'm remembering you in my prayers," you know, like telephone calls that maybe we would do when we wanted to remember something during a coronavirus, for example. You know, I have another letter which my sister shared with me. She found one day. And she said to me, "Mariette, do you remember that Mother gave you a box of chocolates?" And I said, "No, I don't remember." She said, "Well, I just found the letter that Mother wrote me in 1955, which explains what's happened to those chocolates." So she gave me a copy of the letter, remembering that my sister at this time was about 15. She's 7 years older than me. And Mother says, "Dear Kay, I don't think you are so very little now. Thank you very much for your sweet intercalary letter. It was very kind of you to write me such a nice letter. Tell Mariette I had a nice box of chocolates and a handkerchief to send her by Daddy. But he came tearing down the stairs," this is at 2 Lang Road, Paddington, "thinking that he would miss his plane, that he put everything out of my head, and now I will enclose the hanky, but the chocolates, I'm afraid, I ate them myself." So that's what happened to my chocolates. So she was remembering when my dad was there during the NSA meeting, and 2 Lang Road, Paddington was 2 stairs, and many of the bedrooms were upstairs. So obviously he came tearing down the stairs and she forgot. Her flat was downstairs and she forgot to give him the handkerchief and the chocolates. A couple of other little stories I have of Mother. When she was in Adelaide at one time, she was not well. She was staying with Mrs. Bowes in their lovely home up in the Hills District, Mount Lofty. And she was sitting in a lovely big double bed with lots of lovely cushions all around her. And she hadn't been well. And so many of the Baha'is, we went there and we all sat around on the floor and said prayers. And during the prayers, somebody asked for a prayer book. And Mother, with her eyes closed and her head down, she said, "You can't take a prayer book with you." So that's kind of her telling us, well, we should memorize our prayers so that we can take them with us. And there was another lovely story where another time we were praying and she hadn't been again well. And we all said prayers. And then right at the end, everybody was kind of still in prayer mode. And she opened one eye like that and she said, "I'm still here." So that was her wit. Another beautiful story was one that my father told, was when he arrived for NSA meeting one weekend. And he knocked on the door at 2 Lang Road, Paddington. It was a very big, strong, wooden, heavy door. And she opened it. She was staying in the flat there. She opened the door. And they said, "Oh, hi." And she said to my father, "Well, aren't you going to give me a kiss?" And he said, "Mother, you know that Shoghi Effendi told the men that they weren't allowed to kiss the women." And she looked at him and she said, "He didn't say anything about grandmothers." And then, of course, they gave one another a big hug. They adored one another and they were very, very close. And Mother had a wit and she would tease and people would tease her back. And even Dr. Peter Khan told us a story once when we were in Papua New Guinea. He said that once he went to her and there had been a 19-day feast at the Hazarat Courts, and she wasn't well at all and she didn't go. Peter was there. And so afterwards he decided he would go and see her, check up on her and see how she was doing. So he went into her flat and said, "How are you doing, Mother?" You know, and then he said, "You know you're going to lose your voting rights." "Oh," she said, "what have I done now?" He said, "Well, you didn't come to the feast." So that's how he teased her. I'm sure she gave him a mouthful back. So that's lots of my stories, but the last one I have, which is the most beautiful story, this was taken in our front garden, and you will see that Mother is holding a shawl, a green and red shawl, and behind is a bag. She's actually knitting that shawl. She hasn't finished it. The rest is in her bag, but she's just holding it over her like that because she will probably sit down later and continue knitting. And when she dropped the stitches, she would ask us girls to please pick them up. But one day she gave me one of her shawls and she asked me, "Why do you think that I knit these shawls in green and red?" Well, I couldn't think. I didn't know. And so I'm going to ask you the question. Why do you think she knitted these shawls? She knitted many of them and she gave them away. Why did she knit them in green and red? Well, I'll tell you because it's a bit hard for you to give your answers here. Green is for the lineage of the Bab and red is for martyrdom. And that's why Mother Dunn chose green and red. She never used any other colour. And this is the shawl that she gave me. And here's my shawl that I have. So it's very precious to me. Yes. You know, she also gave me her Baha'i ring. And I held on to that dearly. But, you know, somebody needed it more than me. And I hope that they treasure it. Because when we had our house broken into at one stage, they took my jewellery box where that ring was. I just hope they're looking after it because I tell you what, when I get up there, oh, I'm going to have a few words to say because they stole my ring. Here is a lovely photograph of the Intercontinental Conference in Sydney in 1958. Mother is there with 5 other hands, Agnes Alexander, Mason Reamy, my father, and Mr. Cardem. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands altogether at that conference. And I'm in that photograph, except it's very, very hard. I'm hiding behind the lady in the front row. You will see there's a lady, Irene Jackson, who was pioneering in Fiji. And my head is just stuck behind her there. Won't be able to see her very well in this photograph. This is Mother's pose for saying prayers. And many of the friends remember Mother always saying her prayers in this pose. And the dressing gown she had was a blue dressing gown. And I have a story about that too. When she was staying with us one time, she said to my mum, she said, "Madge, my dressing gown is looking so shabby. It's losing all its colour and going yucky colour." She says, "I think I need a new one." So my mum said, "Don't worry, Mother, I get you a new one." She said, "Give me that one and I'll go and see if I can match it." Well, without telling Mother, you know what my mum did? Because, you know, money was scarce in those days. They were all frugal with their pennies. My mother dyed it. She just took it into her laundry and she dyed it. And without showing Mother what she was doing. And then she brought it in a few days back to Mother. She said, "Oh, Mother, I was able to find a nice dressing gown for you." And Mother said, "Oh, it just looks like my old one. Oh, goodness me, that's wonderful. Where did you find that?" Well, then, of course, my mum told her, "Well, I dyed it and look how lovely and fresh it's come up." So Mother was very delighted with it. And of course, as you know, both Mother and Father are buried at Warrenora Cemetery in Sutherland. It was fortuitous of the Baha'is when Father passed away in 1941 that they prepared a double grave in the hope, of course, that Mother would pass away in Sydney so that she could be buried here, and she is. And there's a beautiful verse at the bottom which says, "Whoso hath attained their presence will glory in their meeting, and all that dwell in every land will be illumined by their memory. Make me to drink of the cup of sacrifice and set me free." Abdu'l-Baha. So that is what we are doing today. We are remembering them and being illumined by the memory of Mother Dunn, in this case, on my part, as I knew her as a child. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you, Mariette.
Mariette, that's really so touching and personal. It was beautiful. Thank you so much. What a lovely gift.
You're welcome. I'm very happy to do that.